Ambassador Krell'non adjusted his ceremonial robes for the third time as his transport docked with the human station. The massive Terran construct looked pathetic really. All straight lines and functional design, no artistic flourishes whatsoever. Typical primitive engineering, he mused, watching through the viewport as maintenance crews in bulky suits crawled across the hull like insects. Ambassador, his aide Vex Mari whispered, her voice carrying that annoying tone of concern she'd been using since they'd entered this backwater system. Perhaps we should review the cultural briefing one more time before we... Vex Mari, Krell'non interrupted, his four eyes rolling in perfect synchronization. We're dealing with a species that only discovered faster than light traveled 2 centuries ago. They're barely out of their caves. I hardly think we need to worry about complex cultural nuances. The docking clamps engaged with a thunderous clang that made the entire diplomatic party jump. Krell'non winced. Even their basic engineering was loud and brutish. The humans probably thought subtlety was a type of food seasoning. Sir, the humans have some very specific customs regarding physical contact. Vex Mari tried again. Physical contact? Krell'non laughed, a sound like grinding metal. These creatures spent millennia hitting each other with sticks. I doubt they have any meaningful social protocols. The airlock cycled open with a hiss, and Krell'non got his first look at the human delegation. They were smaller than he'd expected, these legendary Deathworlders. The lead human, a female with dark hair pulled back severely, stepped forward with what Krell'non assumed was their version of a formal greeting. Ambassador Krell'non, she said, her voice crisp and professional. I'm Captain Morrison, Station Commander. Welcome to Frontier Station 7. Wait. Morrison was supposed to be male according to the briefing files. Krell'non's confidence wavered for exactly half a second before reasserting itself. Humans probably couldn't even keep their own records straight. Captain Morrison, he said, letting his natural superiority color his tone. I trust these negotiations will be brief. My people have many more important matters to attend to. The human's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Krell'non dismissed it as typical primitive confusion. Behind her, he noticed another human, a younger female with lighter coloring, wearing what appeared to be some kind of security uniform. She was watching his delegation with an intensity that seemed almost predatory. Ridiculous. Humans were barely evolved primates. What could possibly be threatening about them? Right this way, Ambassador, Captain Morrison said, gesturing toward the station's interior. We have the main conference room prepared for our discussions. Krell'non followed, already planning how quickly he could wrap up this tedious business and return to civilization. As they walked through the station's corridors, Vex Mari sidled up to Krell'non, her datapad clutched nervously in her lower appendages. Sir, if I could just have a moment to discuss the briefing materials. What briefing materials? Krell'non waved dismissively. We're here to sign a simple trade agreement. These humans want our technology, we want access to their mining rights. Basic commerce. Yes, but sir, there are specific protocols mentioned in the xenobiology reports. Humans have very strong territorial instincts, and they're apparently quite sensitive about uninvited physical contact. Krell'non stopped walking so suddenly that 2 junior diplomats crashed into him from behind. Territorial? Vex Mari, these creatures live crammed together in metal boxes floating in space. If they were truly territorial, they'd have killed each other off by now. But sir, the reports specifically mention that humans have something called personal space and that touching without permission can trigger aggressive responses. Aggressive responses? Krell'non's laugh echoed off the metal walls. From them? Look around you, Vex Mari. These humans are tiny, soft, and they don't even have proper claws. What are they going to do? Bleed on us? Captain Morrison had paused at a junction ahead, clearly waiting for them to catch up. Beside her, the security officer from earlier was now joined by several other humans. One was a tall male with graying hair who looked like he'd been through several wars, Another was a compact female with suspicious eyes, and the third was a younger male who seemed to be taking notes on everything. "Ambassador," Captain Morrison called out, "I'd like you to meet the rest of our negotiation team. This is Commander Jake Harrison, our military liaison." The tall male nodded curtly. "Dr. Sarah Chen, our xenobiology specialist." The compact female smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Lieutenant Tommy Burke, our communications officer." The young male waved awkwardly. "And this is Maya Torres, our security chief." Maya Torres. The security officer from earlier stepped forward, and Krell'non noticed she moved with an odd, fluid grace. Her handshake with other humans had been brief, professional, but there was something about the way she held herself that reminded him of the apex predators from his homeworld. "Security chief?" Krell'non asked, amused. "How quaint. What exactly do you secure against? Paperwork disputes?" Maya's expression remained perfectly neutral, but Krell'non caught something in her eyes. A flicker of calculation? Assessment? No, that was ridiculous. She was probably just trying to look important. "Oh, you know," Maya replied, her voice carrying a slight accent Krell'non couldn't place. "The usual, keeping people safe from misunderstandings." Vexmari's data pad chimed urgently. "Sir, the cultural sensitivity protocols are quite explicit about human response to unwanted contact. They recommend maintaining at least arm's length distance at all times unless specifically invited." Krell'non snapped. "These humans invited us here because they need us. They're not going to risk valuable trade relationships over some primitive social taboo. Now stop worrying about nothing and let's get this over with." The human delegation exchanged glances. Maya Torres tilted her head slightly, studying Krell'non with renewed interest. "Right this way then," Captain Morrison said, her tone carefully neutral. "The conference room is just ahead." The conference room was, predictably, another example of human aesthetic failure. Plain walls, basic furniture, and lighting that was far too bright for civilized beings. Krell'non took his position at the head of the table, naturally assuming the dominant position, while his delegation arranged themselves in order of importance. The humans filed in and sat wherever they pleased, apparently having no concept of proper hierarchy. Maya Torres positioned herself near the door, arms crossed, watching everything with those unsettling eyes. "Now then," Krell'non began, activating his holographic display, "let's discuss the terms under which my people will graciously provide you with actual technology in exchange for your raw materials." Captain Morrison leaned forward. "Ambassador, we appreciate the Galactic Coalition's interest in trade, but we should clarify that this is a mutual exchange. We're not supplicants here." Krell'non's smile felt condescending even to himself. Of course. But let's be realistic about the respective values of what we're offering. Your mining operations, while adequate, hardly compare to our quantum processors and gravitational manipulators. Our mining operations, Commander Harrison interjected, produce materials that your people apparently can't replicate artificially. Otherwise, why would you be here? The audacity. These primitive creatures were actually trying to negotiate as equals. Krell'non felt his patience wearing thin. "Commander, I think you misunderstand the nature of this relationship. We're offering you a chance to join galactic civilization. The terms are quite generous, considering." "Generous?" Dr. Chen spoke up, consulting her tablet. "Your initial offer gives us 12% of gross revenues from our own materials." "That's not generous, that's insulting?" "Insulting?" Krell'non's voice rose. "You should be grateful we're even willing to deal with your species at all. Do you have any idea how many civilizations would kill for this opportunity?" The room went very quiet. Maya Torres straightened slightly, her gaze sharpening. "Perhaps," Captain Morrison said carefully, "we should take a short break to reconsider our positions." "No," Krell'non stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I'm tired of this primitive posturing. You want to be part of the galactic community? Then you accept the reality of your position. He walked around the table, his delegation watching nervously. Mari half rose from her seat, but Krell'non waved her down. He stopped directly in front of Maya Torres, who remained seated, calm, watching him approach. "You see, this is the problem with Deathworlders," Krell'non said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You think, because you survived on a harsh planet, you're somehow special. But really, you're just—" His hand shot out to grab Maya's forearm, intending to pull her to her feet as a demonstration of proper respect. He wanted to physically emphasize the point, to show these humans their place in the hierarchy. His fingers had barely made contact with her sleeve when Maya moved. The strike was so fast that Krell'non's brain couldn't process what was happening. One moment he was reaching for her arm, the next his windpipe was collapsing under the precise impact of Maya's knuckles. The hit was surgical, targeted, and delivered with the casual efficiency of someone swatting a fly. Krell'non's eyes went wide as his airway closed. He staggered backward, clutching his throat, making horrible choking sounds. His delegation leaped to their feet in panic, chairs clattering. Maya never moved from her seat. She didn't even uncross her arms. "Sir," she said in the same professional tone she'd used for introductions, "you were advised about personal space protocols." The conference room fell into absolute silence, broken only by Krell'non's desperate gasping. "Medical to Conference Room 3, Captain Morrison said into her comm device, her tone as casual as if she were ordering coffee. "Non-emergency. Breathing difficulty." "Non-emergency?" Mari stared at the captain in horror. Their ambassador was turning an alarming shade of purple, clutching his throat like he was dying, and she called it non-emergency? Should we do something?" whispered junior diplomat Nethkar, his voice trembling. "The medical team will handle it," Commander Harrison replied, not even looking up from his tablet. "Now, about those mining percentages." Mari's mind reeled. Were these humans seriously going to continue negotiations while their ambassador was choking on the floor? She looked around the table desperately. Dr. Chen was making notes. Lieutenant Burke was checking his communication device. Maya Torres remained exactly where she'd been, arms still crossed, watching Krell'non struggle with mild interest. I don't understand," Mari stammered. "He's injured. Shouldn't we stop everything and—" "Oh, he's fine," Maya said, finally uncrossing her arms to check her chronometer. "Tracheal compression, temporary swelling. He'll be breathing normally in about 3 minutes. 4 tops." 3 minutes? Mari's voice cracked. "He could die." "No, he won't," Maya replied with the same tone one might use to discuss the weather. "If I'd wanted him dead, he'd be dead." This was just a little reminder about boundaries. The medical team arrived, 2 humans in crisp uniforms who took one look at Krell'non and immediately began administering some kind of breathing treatment. They worked with practiced efficiency, chatting casually about weekend plans while they stabilized his airway. "Grabbed without permission again?" the lead medic asked Maya. "Yep," Maya replied. "Textbook case. Ignored multiple warnings about contact protocols." "They always do," the medic sighed. "Third one this month. You'd think word would get around." "Third one this month?" Mari's blood ran cold. This happens regularly?" "Oh sure," Dr. Chen said, looking up from her notes. "Usually not with ambassadors, though. Mostly traitors or military types who think they can intimidate us with physical presence." But he barely touched her. Junior diplomat Nethkar protested. It was just a hand on the arm. The entire human delegation turned to stare at him. The silence stretched uncomfortably. "Just a hand on the arm," Captain Morrison repeated slowly. After being explicitly warned about personal space protocols. After his aide spent 20 minutes trying to explain human territorial responses. After Maya identified herself as Security Chief. "I don't understand the problem," Mari said desperately. "In civilized society, a simple touch is meaningless. It's just communication." "And in human society," Maya said, Standing up for the first time since the incident, unwanted physical contact is assault. Especially when it's clearly meant to establish dominance over someone who's already told you no. Vex Mari watched in fascination and horror as Maya moved. Every step was controlled, balanced, purposeful. She wasn't just walking, she was prowling. Like a predator that had decided you weren't worth the energy to hunt. Your ambassador grabbed me, Maya continued, with the clear intent of forcing me to stand, to demonstrate his authority over me. In human culture, that's an attack. I responded proportionally. Proportionally. Vex Mari's voice went up an octave. You collapsed his windpipe. I could have collapsed his skull, Maya replied matter-of-factly, or crushed his larynx completely, or driven his nose bone into his brain, or shattered his spine. I chose the least harmful option that would still effectively communicate my boundaries. The casual way she listed lethal techniques made Vex Mari's skin crawl. This wasn't a soldier reciting training. This was someone discussing everyday options the way one might choose between different flavors of tea. The really impressive part, Commander Harrison added, is that she did it without standing up. It takes real skill to generate that kind of force from a seated position. Thanks, Jake, Maya said, settling back into her chair. I've been working on my leverage angles. Krell'non's breathing was finally returning to normal, though he remained slumped in his chair, staring at Maya with a mixture of terror and bewilderment. The medical team packed up their equipment with the same casual efficiency they'd shown arriving. He'll be fine, the lead medic told Captain Morrison. Standard contact protocol violation. We'll send him the usual information packet about human social boundaries. There's a packet? Vex Mari asked weakly. Oh yes, Dr. Chen smiled. We've had to create quite a comprehensive guide. Most species find it illuminating. As the medical team left, Vex Mari realized something that made her stomach turn. The humans weren't surprised by this. They weren't upset. They weren't even particularly interested. This was just Tuesday for them. Now then, Captain Morrison said, consulting her tablet, shall we return to the discussion of mining percentages? 6 hours later, Vex Mari sat in the guest quarters staring at her datapad, trying to make sense of what she'd witnessed. Krell'non was resting in the medical bay, his throat still tender but his pride wounded far worse. The negotiations had continued for another 3 hours, with the humans acting as if nothing unusual had happened. Computer, she said to the room's AI interface, access public records on human behavior patterns, specifically regarding physical confrontation. Accessing human cultural database, the pleasant voice replied. Please note that some content may be disturbing to non-human species. Disturbing? Vex Mari's curiosity piqued. Display initial findings. The holographic display filled with data that made her blood run cold. Human military records, going back thousands of years. Warfare, combat techniques, weapons development. But that wasn't the disturbing part. Every species had military history. The disturbing part was the recreational section. In computer, explain human recreational fighting. Humans engage in numerous forms of combat sports for entertainment purposes. Boxing, wrestling, martial arts, mixed martial arts, fencing, and approximately 47 other recognized fighting disciplines. They fight for fun? Oh, affirmative. Human children begin learning combat techniques as early as age 3, often disguised as play activities. Common examples include tag, dodgeball, and capture the flag, all of which involve elements of pursuit, evasion, and strategic thinking. Vex Mari's hands trembled as she scrolled through the data. Videos of humans punching each other bloody while crowds cheered. Entire stadiums full of humans watching two fighters try to render each other unconscious. And they called it entertainment. Computer, show me human daily physical interactions. The display shifted to show what humans apparently considered normal social behavior. Handshakes that could crush bones, back slaps that would hospitalize most species. Something called high fives that involved two humans striking each other's hands with significant force. For celebration. Computer, analyze the incident with Ambassador Krell'non. Was Security Chief Torres' response within normal human parameters? Analyzing Security Chief Torres' response was classified as extremely restrained by human standards. The force applied was calculated to cause temporary discomfort and breathing difficulty without permanent damage. This falls under Category 1 responses in human defensive protocols. Category 1? How many categories are there? Human defensive responses are classified in 12 categories, ranging from verbal warnings to lethal force. Security Chief Torres employed the second lowest level of physical response available to her. Vexmari felt faint. Show me Category 12 responses. Access denied. Content deemed too disturbing for non-human viewing without psychological preparation. Override. Security clearance Vexmari 77 Alpha. The display hesitated. Warning: the following content depicts extreme human combat capabilities. Viewer discretion is advised. What appeared on the screen made Vexmari's dinner come back up. Humans moving with impossible speed and precision, dismantling opponents with surgical violence. These weren't soldiers in desperate battles. These were security footage from self-defense situations. Humans protecting themselves from threats. Computer. Cross-reference human military training with civilian population. Approximately 67% of human adults have received formal combat training through military service, law enforcement, or recreational programs. An additional 28% have informal training through sports, family instruction, or self-defense courses. That's 95% of the adult population. Affirmative. The remaining 5% are classified as conscientious objectors or individuals with physical limitations preventing combat training. However, even these individuals typically possess basic defensive knowledge. Vexmari's hands shook as she accessed more files. Human games that involved full-contact collision sports. Their entertainment that featured explosions, high-speed chases, and simulated combat. Their children's stories about heroes who solved problems through strategic violence. Computer, show me human restraint protocols. Human restraint protocols are designed to use minimum necessary force to achieve tactical objectives. Standard doctrine emphasizes de-escalation, proportional response, and preservation of life when possible. When possible, humans prefer non-lethal solutions when tactical situations permit. However, when human safety is threatened, protocols shift to rapid neutralization of threats using maximum efficiency. Vexmari thought about Maya Torres sitting calmly in her chair, casually describing the various ways she could have killed Krell'non instead of just choking him. That had been restraint. That had been her being nice. Computer, access human psychological profiles. How do they view violence? Human attitudes toward violence are complex. While they generally prefer peaceful solutions, they view defensive violence as morally justified and sometimes necessary. Humans make distinctions between aggressive violence, which they condemn, and protective violence, which they consider heroic. And touching someone without permission? Unwanted physical contact is universally considered aggressive behavior in human culture. The severity of response depends on context, intent, and perceived threat level. Vexmari closed her eyes, trying to process what she'd learned. Humans weren't just capable of violence, they were raised in it, entertained by it, and trained in it from birth. What Ambassador Krell'non had done, grabbing Maya's arm to establish dominance, wasn't just rude in human culture. It was an attack. And Maya Torres, this security chief who'd responded with what humans considered extreme restraint, had treated it exactly as what it was. It's a threat to be neutralized with minimum necessary force. Computer final query. In human terms, how would Ambassador Krell'non's actions be classified? Ambassador Krell'non's actions would be classified as assault, with intent to intimidate and establish dominance through physical force. In human legal terms, this constitutes a criminal act. And Torres' response? Textbook defensive action. Proportional force applied to neutralize threat while preserving life of aggressor. In human terms, Security Chief Torres showed remarkable restraint and professional conduct. Vexmari sat back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. They'd sent a diplomatic mission to negotiate with what they'd assumed were primitive savages. Instead, they'd walked into a room full of apex predators who'd been politely trying to have a conversation. And when their ambassador had made what humans considered an unprovoked attack on their security chief, she'd responded with the equivalent of a gentle pat on the wrist. The truly terrifying part? The other humans hadn't been surprised. They'd been impressed by her restraint. 3 days later, Ambassador Krell'non stood before the High Council of the Galactic Coalition, his throat still bearing the faint bruises of his encounter with human diplomacy. The circular chamber, with its crystalline walls and floating observation platforms, felt more like a tribunal than a briefing room. "Let me understand this correctly," High Counselor Tethran said, his voice carrying the weight of 5 centuries of diplomatic experience. "You were incapacitated by a single human, a female human, who was sitting down at the time." High Counselor Krell'non began, his voice still raspy. "I must emphasize that this was not a typical diplomatic encounter. These humans are different from our intelligence reports." "Different how?" Counselor Yethmin leaned forward, her sensor arrays focusing on Krell'non's vital signs. "Our xenobiology teams classified them as Class C sentience. Mildly aggressive but manageable." "The classification is wrong," Krell'non said flatly. "Catastrophically wrong. These humans aren't Class C anything. They're apex predators masquerading as a diplomatic species." A ripple of skeptical laughter ran through the chamber. Counselor Nextool's tentacles writhed with amusement. "Apex predators? Krell'non, they're barely 5 feet tall and made of soft tissue. What could possibly be threatening about them?" "They train for violence from birth," Krell'non replied, his voice growing stronger. "Every single one of them. They call it sports and entertainment and physical education, but it's combat training. Systematic, comprehensive combat training." "Surely you're exaggerating," Tethran said. "Am I?" Krell'non activated his holographic display, showing footage from the human networks. "This is what they call boxing. 2 humans repeatedly striking each other in the head until one falls unconscious. For entertainment. Millions watch this voluntarily." The chamber fell silent as the brutal imagery played out, humans pounding each other bloody while crowds cheered. "This is what they call American football," Krell'non continued, switching feeds. "Armored humans colliding at high speeds, attempting to physically dominate territorial space. This is hockey, where they fight with sticks while moving at dangerous speeds on frozen surfaces." "Enough," Tethran said quietly. "What do you recommend?" "Immediate reclassification?" Krell'non replied without hesitation. "Humans should be treated as Class A apex predators, the same category we reserve for the Krell'non hive warriors and the void touched. Every interaction should be conducted through maximum diplomatic protocol. And the trade agreements? Give them whatever they want," Krell'non said. Their security chief casually described 12 different ways she could have killed me while explaining why she chose the least harmful option. She wasn't boasting, High Counselor. She was being instructional. Counselor Yethmin's sensors flickered. "You're saying she showed restraint? Extreme restraint, according to their own cultural standards." I grabbed her arm to establish dominance. "In human culture, that's considered an unprovoked attack. Her response was what they call appropriate defensive action. And the other humans? Treated it as a routine workplace incident. Their medical team had standardized protocols for dealing with contact violations. This happens regularly, High Counselor. Regularly enough that they have paperwork for it." The chamber erupted in urgent whispers. Tethran called for order with a gesture. "Very well," the High Counselor said finally. "Emergency Protocol 7 is now in effect for all human interactions. Full diplomatic immunity, maximum respect protocols, and immediate concession to reasonable demands." "There's more," Krell'non added. "The human command structure has officially commended Security Chief Torres for her exceptional diplomatic restraint and professional conduct in handling the situation." "They gave her an award?" Counselor Nextol's tentacles went rigid with shock. For not killing me, Krell'non confirmed. Apparently her restraint in the face of what they considered a physical attack was deemed worthy of recognition. The High Council chamber fell completely silent. Motion to reclassify humans as Class Apex Predators, Deathworlder announced. All in favor. The vote was unanimous. And Krell'non? Deathworlder added. Perhaps consider a career change. I hear the Archives Department is looking for researchers. Already submitted my application, High Counselor, Krell'non replied. I'm thinking of specializing in human recreational violence. Apparently, it's a growing field. 6 months later, Dr. Krell'non adjusted his new academic robes and reviewed his notes one final time. His lecture hall at the Galactic Institute was packed with diplomats, traders, and military personnel, all eager to learn about the galaxy's most paradoxical species. Welcome to Deathworlder Studies 101, he began, his voice now carrying the authority of hard-earned experience. Today we'll be discussing the Torres Protocol and why touching a human without permission is classified as a potentially lethal mistake. In the front row, Ambassador Yax Tool raised a tentacle. Professor, is it true that humans consider our standard greeting gestures to be aggressive posturing? Absolutely, Krell'non replied. Humans interpret direct approaches, extended eye contact, and invasion of personal space as threat displays. Under the Torres Protocol, all interactions must begin at minimum 3-meter distance with verbal permission for any physical contact. But Professor, another student interjected, why are they so sensitive about touching when they literally fight each other for entertainment? Krell'non smiled, the expression still feeling strange on his face. Because context matters to humans. Consensual violence is recreation. Non-consensual touching is assault. They make these distinctions instinctively. His communication device chimed with an incoming message from Frontier Station 7. Captain Morrison was updating him on the latest diplomatic incidents. 3 more touch protocol violations this month, all resulting in immediate defensive responses from various human personnel. The galactic community was slowly learning. The most fascinating part, Krell'non continued, is that humans remain completely baffled by our new approach to them. They can't understand why we now treat them with what they consider excessive politeness. They keep asking if we're feeling well. The class erupted in nervous laughter. Remember, Krell'non concluded, humans don't see themselves as apex predators. They think they're being friendly and restrained. Maya Torres still considers her response to my contact violation as maybe a little harsh, and has asked multiple times if I need counseling for the trauma. He paused, looking out at his students. The Torres Protocol exists because humans are the only species in the galaxy who can hospitalize you while genuinely believing they're showing remarkable self-control. Treat them accordingly. In the back of the lecture hall, a junior diplomat raised his hand. Professor, what if we forget and accidentally touch one? Krell'non touched his throat reflexively. Then you'd better hope they like you. Because their idea of proportional response and ours are very, very different concepts. The class took extensive notes.